Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1318B, and today's date is June 28th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, The World is Being Distracted on Purpose, Here's Why. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I just placed an interview on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. So if you go over to YouTube and you type in X22 Report Spotlight, it'll bring you to the video. Or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there. The same thing on New Sentinel. Or if you're on Steemit, you can go over to Steemit and you can view the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we can see on the corporate media they're making a really big deal about the Senate health care bill where they're going to postpone it after July 4th. And we can see that Obamacare, well, that's the Affordable Care Act, that is completely dying. And what we're seeing is that the 19th Obamacare co-op, well, it just collapsed. Now there are only 4 left for 2018. Minutemen Health of Massachusetts and New Hampshire announced it is withdrawing from the Affordable Care Act exchanges in 2018, and it looks like Obamacare is just completely imploding on itself right now. And again, if this was a good healthcare system, people would come out in droves to get this healthcare. But when you see deductibles rising, when you see premiums continually moving up, and you can see your options dwindling, there's a problem here, especially when you put penalties on people who don't take your junk. If you have to force someone to take health care by penalizing them, that means you don't have a good product. And the people are speaking up, because it doesn't matter what Trump is saying. If the people actually thought that this was good for them, they would get it because premiums would be low, deductibles would be low, and the healthcare plans would be amazing. But people are looking at this saying, I can't afford this. Secondly, they didn't take into account how bad the economy is, where people are struggling to survive every single day on 1 part-time, 2 part-time, or a full-time job that's not paying that much. And we can see that they didn't take into account any of this. They just tried to push it on us, and of course, they exempted themselves. Now, this other health care that the Senate's trying to push, or Trump is trying to push, it's not going to be any better. What we need to do is we need to get rid of the healthcare industry. We need to get rid of certain corporations, certain influences within government. And we need the people to say, this is what we want. This is what we need. This is something we could use. Instead, they're telling us what is good for us. It should be the other way around. Now, Project Veritas, they came out with a bombshell yesterday showing that CNN producer didn't believe that the Russian story was at all real. There was no evidence. There's nothing. Today, they came out with something else. And this time, CNN's Van Jones, well, he got caught revealing his true thoughts on CNN and the Russian meddling narrative. And he said this is one big nothing burger. The Project Veritas reporter, what do you think is going to happen this week with the whole Russian thing? Van Jones, the Russian thing is just a big nothing burger. The PV reporter said, really? Van Jones says, yeah. And we can see right now, we all knew this was absolutely nothing. There was nothing there. And this is why we can see the American public, when they look at the corporate media, when they look at these newspapers, they start to realize, you know something, we can't trust them. Gallup did a survey, and they have found that 27%, well, they're the only ones who have confidence in the newspaper. The other percentage, the 73%, they don't have confidence in the paper. Now, if we go back to 1990, there was a record 39% that had confidence in the newspaper, according to Gallup. And it looks like this percentage is continually dropping. Yes, and there are times when the percentage moves up a little bit, moves down a little bit, but we've been seeing the trend where it's been moving down. Now, CNN is basically saying that because of this whole Russian collusion, their ratings are going up. But is it really because people are flocking to CNN, or are they just moving from different corporate media stations to them? And we could see this is exactly what is happening. They're just shuffling people around, and they're trying to convince everyone that everyone is watching them. But we can see right now from everything that's coming out, we knew for a very long time that this was fake news. Now, since the whole Russian collusion, the Russian cyber attacks on the election is completely falling apart, we see that certain corporate media publications like the Washington Post, the Washington Journal, and many others, they're backtracking now on the narrative of the story. And what they're saying now is that most of the technical intelligence used by the Obama administration to allege that Moscow interfered in the 2016 presidential election, well, that came from other countries, and these other countries handed him bad information. Now, what they're doing right now is they're just grasping for straws. They're trying to figure out a way out of this. Actually, Moscow, they're out there, and this is coming from Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova. She is saying that Moscow, well, they've been told to be quiet on certain things, and they're saying that Obama had strange habits regarding U.S.-Russia diplomatic relations. And they're saying that Russia's no longer going to keep the secrets. They're going to let them all out. Now, Zakharova, she explains that over the past few years, we've seen many strange things happen in Washington. The U.S. State Department has more than once asked us not to announce planned visits until the last minute. We did as they asked. But a day or two later, the information was leaked by the U.S. State Department and sometimes by the Obama administration. Frankly, this put Russia and the media in a strange situation because they didn't know who to believe, the official agencies or the many leaks. And it was very strange the way this was done. And they disclosed that no longer are they going to keep these little secrets that they had between them and the Obama administration. And they're saying that, listen, during Obama, there was no way we could rebuild the relationship. But with Trump, yes, we would like to rebuild relationship between the United States and Russia. And we can see that the corporate media out there, they are playing up that certain individuals within government are trying to convince Trump that Russia is the enemy. And Trump is saying, no, they're not. And again, Russia is not the enemy. It's the individuals within government called the deep state, the neocons, the central banks. They're the ones who are the enemy to the United States of America. So why are they pushing so hard to convince him that Russia is the enemy? Because what they're really trying to do is they're trying to create this conflict to get us into war. And they're trying to keep this whole narrative moving forward. This is what they're trying to do. So what's very interesting about all this, if we go back in time, remember that dossier that came out and the alternative media, the new media, looked at it and said, yeah, this can't be true. Something's going on here. And there was an organization that actually created the dossier. And the firm that created the false dossier on Trump, well, they're refusing to cooperate with Congress. They're refusing to turn over to Congress information of not just how the report was crafted, but who paid for it. The Senate Judiciary Committee threatened now to subpoena the firm Fusion GPS after it refused to answer questions and provide records to the panel. They've been ordered to identify who financed the fake dossier. Now, Fusion GPS, they describe themselves as a research and strategic intelligence firm founded by, yes, 3 Wall Street Journal investigative reporters. And we can see that this was completely created out of thin air, and it was supposed to be used to bury Trump, and it is not working. And now they're refusing to hand over the information of who financed it, how was it written, who did this. And we're going to have to watch this to see how this plays out, because this is going to be very interesting. Now, out in Venezuela, we can see that on Tuesday there was a terrorist or a coup happening where this rogue police officer stole a helicopter and started to drop grenades. Now, what's very interesting about this whole thing is that this individual is an actor, a film star, who paints himself as a James Bond type of Rambo figure on social media. And he actually starred in a film, and also this individual's name is Perez. He's 36 years old. He directed and starred in a 2015 Venezuelan action movie called Suspended Death, about the rescue of a kidnapped businessman, which includes scenes of him firing a rifle from a helicopter and emerging from water in scuba gear. And on Tuesday evening, Perez unfurled a banner from the helicopter with the words "Freedom." So this whole thing looks like a complete setup where they were trying to convince everyone that there was this coup going on in Venezuela. Now, who's responsible for this? Don't know exactly who, but you could tell that this whole thing is a complete setup. Now, it looks like Ukraine, France, they agreed to revive the Minsk agreement in Ukraine. And we see that Germany, Russia, Ukraine, and France, they are now getting together and they're going to be trying to work through the Minsk agreement, well, Minsk 1, Minsk 2 agreements once again. Where will this go? We don't know. Now, something very interesting out in North Korea. Coming out of Japan in their newspapers, they reported that former South Korean President Park, well, she made plans to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, adding that the ex-president Park, who was impeached in corruption scandal earlier this year, signed a document approving a leadership change in North Korea back in 2015. Now, according to the Japanese outlet, South Korea's intelligence agencies were to prepare operations to carry out the plan. Now, the report noted that the plotters considered arranging accidents with a car accident or a derailment of a train carrying Kim Jong-un. This was on the table. They also reportedly considered staging a coup in North Korea. Now, I believe that this is what this movie was about that was released from Sony Pictures about having a regime change in North Korea. I think they were planning on doing this, and the whole thing, well, it didn't really work out. Now North Korea is out there saying that they've issued a standing order for the execution of former South Korean President Park. And we can see right now that their entire plan was to remove Kim Jong-un and replace him with a puppet leader and have a puppet government in North Korea, but it looks like this didn't go well at all. We see that the Islamic State, they are collapsing under the boot of the Syrian army in Deir ez-Zor, and they are pushing forward. They are hitting al-Nusra, they're hitting al-Sham, and we can see that the terrorist groups, well, it's only a matter of time before they're all wiped out. And that means the deep state, well, they're running out of time. So one or two things are going to happen. They're going to create an event of all events, and it's going to start a war. Or they're just going to be beaten, and that is it. Because really, what other choices do they have? Not many. There might be a third one in there where they can say, oh, the Kurds want this part of Syria, but then again you have Russia, you have China, you have Iran, you have Syria. They all must agree to this, and I don't think it's going to happen. Now, this ransomware that is out there, this may be a smokescreen for maybe a larger type of cyber attack. Because already we're starting to see that NATO is out there and they're saying that, listen, these cyber attacks, it could trigger Article 5. And if we see a bigger cyber attack and we know what country has done this, we could trigger Article 5. This is the mutual defense commitment, and we'll be able to attack that country. Now, this is very scary because they can just pick any country and they can show you proof without having any proof. They could just say, yes, this is what it is. And they've done this many times before, where later on it turns out to be completely fake, phony, and false. But this ransomware is hitting many different areas right now. And we can see that there is a way to get around it. Someone came up with a digital vaccine, and users must simply create a read-only file with the title PERFC, place it in their C Windows folder. This will stop the attack dead in its tracks. It does not, however, prevent infection to other machines. It just stops it on that system. So if you're one of those people that got infected, you might want to try this. And you might want to see if this works before you actually pay the ransom, which I don't think many people do anyhow. Now, we've learned from Vault 7, this is coming from WikiLeaks, that there's this exploit that the CIA uses. And there's many of them that they use. It's called ELSA. ELSA. It is a malware used to track Wi-Fi enabled devices running Microsoft Windows, allowing the CIA to gather location data. Now, you don't have to have your GPS on because they use the Wi-Fi to pinpoint where you are. The malware allows the CIA to track targets' location even when they're not connected to the internet. All that's needed is for the device to be Wi-Fi enabled and in an area where Wi-Fi access points are in range. Using Wi-Fi, they can pinpoint where you are, and this is how they can track individuals. Now, we know yesterday, and we could see it all over the corporate media, we could see it on the alternative media, one Seymour Hersh came out with an article, an investigative report, showing that this chemical attack never really happened. And Trump actually fired missiles on the intel that he had. Now remember, it hit a base which was completely cleared out. I believe this was completely planned, and it was a complete setup for a complete distraction. And the corporate media went along with it. This time, there was information that was leaked out from the White House, from a source that was very close to the White House, to the corporate media, stating that Assad is getting prepared and ready to use chemical weapons. Now, first of all, if you're going to have a false flag, you don't mention this ahead of time. You can use words like, well, if he crosses the red line, if this happens, but you don't leak the information. If we look in the past of all these false flags, it makes no sense to tell the country or the group of what you're going to do. It makes no sense. The only reason you would do this is if you're trying to transfer information. Now, what I think happened here is that the White House received intel. They didn't tell the Pentagon. They didn't tell other departments because they were very worried of who was part of this entire operation. Because he still doesn't know who he can trust. And there's leaks all over the place, as we know. There's also spying going on within the White House. So this information was leaked to send a warning message. Now you say, well, that's ridiculous. Why would he do that? Well, remember, Mueller is still doing an investigation about Russian collusion and whatever he's doing. And they would use this against Trump if he actually went out of his way to call Russia or to try to send a message. They would capture this. You know this. But to say it out in the public, well, he just avoided all of it. And it allowed Syria and Russia to say, okay, we know what's going on here. They're going to try to use another chemical attack. And remember, to create these false flags, they have to prep for it. They have to get everything ready, everything in place, so it looks real, even though we can pinpoint things out that are completely fake, phony, and false. And this was going to be used to basically send more troops, maybe bomb more infrastructure in Syria. Now, did Trump back himself into a corner? Maybe, because let's say they go through with the false flag. What is Trump going to do at this point? Is he going to go in and bomb? Or he could just say, let's have an investigation of how this came about. Is this truly what happened? Was this a chemical attack? Let Russia and Syria decide what really happened here. Now, of course, the corporate media will say, well, they're the ones who are responsible for this. You can't let that happen. Okay, let's set in a team from these countries, maybe China. Well, they're not going to like that. So he has ways of getting around this. It doesn't mean the corporate media is going to like this. Doesn't mean the deep state's going to like this. But he can use other countries, not the coalition forces, other countries to inspect what happened. Now, I think what happened here is that they stopped whatever the deep state was trying to do. And I don't think this came about because of the Seymour Hersh article, which was a very good article. I mean, it was very well laid out, and yes, he does show that this chemical weapons attack never really happened. I think what was happening here is that the deep state, they were getting prepared to do this again. His article just so happened to come out at the same exact time. And we can see right now that Mattis is out there saying that the Assad regime in Syria has taken President Trump's warning against launching another chemical attack seriously. And he's not going to do it. Really, he knows this information. No, what they're really saying is that Russia, Syria, and Iran, they got the message. They know what's happening. They know where to look. They know what to expect if anything does happen. Now, Mattis was out there, and he is pledging to limit the involvement of the U.S. in Syria to anti-ISIS operations after a series of heightened tensions between the U.S., which means we're only going after the Islamic State. Now, we'll have to watch to see if this actually happens. What I see happening here is they're trying to bring down the tensions everywhere, while the deep state is trying to ratchet them up. Now, we know right now that things are very tricky in this area. We see U.S. surveillance planes, well, they've been flying around Syria after the warning of weapons of mass destruction, the chemical attack, and we can see that there was the RC-135U, the RC-135V Rivet Joint, and the P-8 Poseidon. They were off the coast of Syria, and enthusiasts who are monitoring air traffic noticed that these planes were monitoring the coast and, trying to pick up anything if anything happens. One thing that we do know is that the USS George W Bush, well, it has left the area and it is en route to the Israel port of Haifa. So it has left the area. It is no longer there. So we can see right now that all these aircraft carriers that they're saying that they're bringing in and we're going to war, it's just not happening. Now we know that the deep state is not happy with what Trump is doing, with his individuals. And remember, it's not just Trump. I say Trump, but there are certain individuals behind the scenes that are directing Trump, helping him, and putting plans together. It's not just one individual who's sitting there doing all of this. And we can see that the deep state, well, they're not very happy about this, because out in Newsweek and the corporate media, they have articles like, in Syria, Trump is letting Iran and Assad win. You can tell right there and then that they don't like what he is doing in Syria, because it's the opposite of what they want done. What they want done is they want to go after Iran. They want to go after Assad. What Trump is doing, he's trying to back out of all this. Now, when we look at the deep state, you have to remember, they have been intertwined into government, in departments, into the corporate media, and their tentacles are everywhere. You just can't pull it out. It's very difficult to do. So what you need to do is you need to cut off a little part here, cut off a little part here, destroy them there, before you can remove the deep state. And if you really look at the actions of what he's doing, and yes, has Trump done everything he promised? Well, it's a little difficult to do everything you promise when you have another force against you, when they're keeping you busy with other things. But what he has done is slowly but surely trying to cut away at all these tentacles within government. And eventually what's going to happen is he's, not just him, but the rest of the individuals are going to be able to remove the deep state. And this process has already started. And we're going to see him do more and more things as time goes on. And we can see right now, the deep state, they're completely backed into a corner, they only have a couple options left. And you can see that once you back a wild animal into a corner, well, they come out with their claws. And this is what we should be nervous about right now, because what we're seeing is that this is the end of the deep state, and they're going to strike back any way they can. And we need to be ready to point out exactly what they're doing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.